Welcome to the second topic of strategic management. This topic is going to focus on the external environmental analysis. The external environments in which firms operate are both complex and challenging at times. The central issue is that in order to survive and grow, a company's management must understand the implications that environmental forces have for its strategic opportunities and threats. And managers must develop the ability to identify opportunities and threats in their external environment. In another word, for a company to succeed in its strategy, it must either fit the industry environment in which it operates, or it must be able to reshape the environment to its advantage through company's choice of strategy. Typically, a company fails when its strategy no longer fits the environment in which it operates. So, to achieve a good fit, managers must understand the forces that shape competition in their external environment. So, in this session, we'll try to identify three major parts of a firm's external environment. These include the general environment, the industry environment, and the competitor environment. Next, we'll discuss the four parts of the external environment analysis process, which assist managers identify opportunities and threats. The four parts are scanning, monitoring, forecasting, and assessing. Then we explain the various components of the general or macro environment, which include demographic, economic, political, legal, socio-cultural, technological environment, and so on. We'll explore how trends in the macro environment can shape the nature of competition in an industry. It is critical that managers understand the strategic relevance of environmental changes and identify trends in each of these components. Then our discussion will move to focus on industry environmental forces that determine the level of competition in the industry. By studying these forces, a firm can identify a position in an industry where it can influence the forces in its favor or protect itself from the power of the forces in order to gain competitiveness and earn above average industry returns. We will explain and review the primary technique, which is the five forces model that is used to analyze competition in an industry environment. We'll also explore the concept of strategic groups and illustrate its implications for industry analysis. Then we move to discuss on how industries evolve over time with reference to the industry lifecycle model. I presume many of you are familiar with industry lifecycle model, but this time we will explain it from strategic management perspective and examine how the competitive changes take place during the evaluation of industry. Following this, we'll also identify some of the limitations inherent in the five forces model, strategic group, and industry lifecycle models. However, please note these limitations do not render the models useless, but managers need to be aware of the limitations as they apply these models. We conclude the session with our discussion on competitor environment and its impact on a firm's competitive advantage. External environmental factors like war and political unrest, economic growth rate, and new technologies affect firms' growth and profitability. These factors are not static, but they change over time, and current environmental conditions differ from those previously faced by companies. For example, technological advancement these days require more timely and effective competitive actions and responses by companies. Similarly, rapid sociological changes such as customers' growing preference for healthy diet or their awareness of human rights abuse globally affect workforce practices and product demand of diverse consumer groups. Likewise, governmental policies and regulatory conditions affect where and how firms decide to produce and compete. This figure presents the three components of a firm external environment. The general environment, which is composed of forces in the macro environment that can indirectly influence an industry and the firms within the industry. Let me remind you some of the definitions such as industry, firm, and a sector. An industry is a group of companies offering products or services that are close substitutes for each other. Close substitutes are products or services that satisfy the same basic consumer need. From that point of view, while airlines and taxi broadly fall under the transport industry, but they are not close substitutes. Airlines provide faster services than taxis. Firms within the same industry are rivals, also called competitors. So this is why airlines and taxis are not competitors to each other, especially when we want to travel overseas. A sector is a group of closely related industries such as agricultural sector, light engineering sector, furniture sectors. Next is the market segments, which refers to the distinct groups of customers within a market that can be differentiated on the basis of various characteristics such as individual attributes and specific demands. The figure lists 6 forces in the general environment or macro environment, which include economic, political, legal, socio-cultural, technological, global, and physical. Popularly, this is known as PEST analysis, that is political, economic, social, and technological, or PESTEL analysis, that is political, economic, social, technological, natural environment, and legal. Now, an analysis of the general environment focuses on environmental trends and their implications. Let's move to the second one, the industry environment, which is the set of forces directly influence a firm and its competitive decision and response. The forces in the industry environment includes the threat of new entrants, the power of suppliers, the power of buyers, the threat of product substitutes, and the intensity of rivalry among competing firms. An analysis of the industry environment focuses on the factors and conditions that influence an industry's profitability potential. And finally, the competitor analysis helps firms develop an understanding of its current competitors. An analysis of competitors is focused on predicting competitors' actions, purpose, responses, and intention. Understanding the firm's competitor environment complements the insight provided by studying the general and industry environment. Together, the results of analysis of these three external environmental components influence the firm's vision, mission, choice of strategy based on opportunities and threats present in the environment, and competitive actions and responses a company will take to implement those strategies. Opportunities arise when a company can take advantage of conditions in its environment to formulate and implement strategies that enable it to become more profitable. Threats arise when conditions in the external environment endanger the integrity and profitability of a company's business. Awareness building of opportunities and threats help firms build new capabilities and core competencies, shield the firm from environmental threats, and pursue opportunities to better serve consumers and other stakeholders' needs. A firm's understanding of the external environment is matched with the knowledge about its internal environment, which is basically the resources, competencies, and capabilities. This will be considered to take strategic actions that result in strategic competitiveness and above average return. I repeat, a firm's understanding of the external environment is matched with the knowledge about its internal environment to take strategic decisions or actions and responses that result in strategic competitiveness and above average return. Please note, although firms cannot directly control the elements of the external environment, they may be able to influence and will be influenced by these factors. The tables in this and the next slide list the forces in various general environmental segments. For example, these are demographic segments. Some of the variables in there is population size, structure of and geographic distribution of people or population. Now, economic segment, inflation rates, interest rates, trade deficits, surpluses, budget deficits or surpluses. So these are some of the environmental forces that we need to analyze to see what are the trends and what are the events present in these macro environment that can actually create some opportunities for us, or that can actually impact our profitability capacity or profit making capacity in the short and longer term. So the next one is technological segment, global segment, and sustainable physical environmental segment. So sustainable physical environmental segment is basically we're talking about the climate change issues, like the energy consumption, renewable energy efforts, and how we can minimize the carbon footprint or environmental footprint. So those are the issues that will be analyzed while we do the external environmental analysis, the general environmental analysis or macro environmental analysis. These are the 4 parts of external environmental analysis. These 4 parts are vital to the firm's efforts to recognize and evaluate opportunities and threats that are present in an environment. This process starts with scanning, which involves the study of all segments in the general environment with the purpose of detecting early warning signs regarding potential changes or changes that are already underway. In most cases, information and data being collected or observed are ambiguous, incomplete, and appear to be unconnected. However, scanning is crucial, especially in a highly volatile environment, and the scanning system should align with the organization context. For example, a scanning design for volatile environments is not suitable for firms competing in a stable environment. The scanning may signal a future changes in the needs and lifestyle of baby boomers as they approach retirement age. Baby boomers is an element of a demographic environment. Demographic environment deals with the size and structure of population in a country. So the information about these baby boomers may provide opportunities for financial institutions, hospitals, tour operators, real estate agencies as they prepare for an increase in the number of retirees. For example, this information can be used by hospitals to open up new services for cancer, for heart disease, and maybe for dental treatment. The tour operators can open up new destination for these retirees. Now, the development of IT provides significant opportunities to obtain information. For example, Amazon.com records significant information about individuals visiting its website, particularly when a purchase is made. Amazon then welcomes the individual by name when he or she visits the website again. It even sends messages to the individual about specials and new products similar to that purchased in previous visits. Now, the second step of these environmental analysis, external environment analysis, is monitoring. Monitoring represents a process whereby analysts observe environmental changes over time to see if, in fact, an important trend begins to emerge. The critical issues in monitoring is that the analyst be able to detect the meaning from the data and information collected during the scanning process. As I mentioned earlier, these data are generally ambiguous, incomplete, and unconnected. So, understanding this data and give a meaning to this data is important. The next step is to take the information and data gathered during the scanning and monitoring phases and attempt to project forward. Forecasting represents the process whereby feasible projections of what might happen and how quickly it might happen is developed. Because of uncertainty, forecasting events and outcomes accurately is a challenging task. For example, forecasting demand for new technological products such as a new smartphone app is difficult because technology trends are continually shortening product life cycle due to the hyper competitive nature of the industry. The objective of the final step, which is assessing, is to determine the timing and significance of the effects of changes and trends in the environment on the strategic management of a firm. Getting the strategy right will depend on the accuracy of this assessment. Although gathering and organizing information is important, appropriately interpreting that information to determine if an identified trend in the general environment is an opportunity or threat is critical. A major challenge for managers and firms engaging in the process of external analysis is to recognize biases and assumptions that may affect the analysis process. This is important because these may limit the accuracy of forecast and assessment. For example, managers may choose to disregard certain information, thus missing critical indicators of future environmental changes. Or past experiences may influence the ways that opportunities or threats are being perceived by managers, if they are perceived at all. One solution might be to solicit multiple inputs so a single source is not able to manipulate the information, and to seek frequent feedback regarding the accuracy or usefulness of forecast and assessment. So now we move to the next component of external environmental analysis, which is industry environmental analysis. An industry's structural characteristics influence a firm's choice of strategies. As the companies within the industry compete for market share, the strategies implemented by these companies influence each other. So once the boundaries of an industry have been identified, managers should then analyze competitive forces within the industry in order to identify opportunities and threats in that given industry. Michael Porter 5 Forces framework is an important tool to use for this purpose. As each of these forces grows stronger, it limits the ability of established companies to raise prices and earn greater profits. Within this framework, a strong competitive force can be regarded as a threat because it depresses profits. In addition to these 5 forces, it is increasingly being recognized that another force, which is the power of complement providers, also shape competition within an industry. This slide presents the Porter 5 Forces framework. You can see in here, in addition to the 5 forces, the other force, which is the power of complement providers, is added, which is actually the 6th force. Now, rivalry within the industry gets stronger when the 5 forces also appear stronger. In other words, competition gets stronger and profitability gets weaker when these 5 forces appear very strong. So now let's focus on the 6 forces that affect industry's competitiveness or profitability. The first force that I'm going to discuss here is called the risk of entry by potential competitors. Potential competitors are companies that are currently not competing in the industry but have the capacity to do so if they choose. Established companies already operating in an industry often attempt to preempt potential competitors from entering the industry because as more companies enter, it becomes difficult for established companies to protect their market share and generate profits. Therefore, a high risk of entry by potential competitors represents a threat to the profitability of established companies. The risk of entry by potential competitors is a function of the height of barriers to entry, which is determined by economies of scale, brand loyalty, absolute cost advantage, capital requirement, switching cost, government regulations, access to distribution, and so on. So the economies of scale arise when unit costs fall as a firm expands its output. Usually, companies can gain cost reduction through mass producing a standardized product. There are many other sources of economies of scale. We'll be talking about it in our functional strategy chapter, which is topic 4. A new entrant is unlikely to quickly generate the level of demand for its product that would allow it to develop economies of scale. Brand loyalty. Brand loyalty exists when consumers have a preference for the products of an established company. Significant brand loyalty makes it difficult for new entrants to take market share away from established companies. A new company may offer their products at a cheaper price. However, this may result in lower profits or even losses, principally due to its higher fixed cost compared to the established companies. A company can create brand loyalty by continuously advertising its brand name, products, and company name. Patent protection of its products, product innovation achieved through company research and development programs, and emphasis on high quality products and exceptional after-sales service. Next is absolute cost advantage. Sometimes established companies have an absolute cost advantage over their potential entrants, meaning that potential entrants cannot expect to match the established company's lower cost structure. Absolute cost advantage arise mainly from three sources. The first one is superior production operations and process due to accumulated experience, patents, or trade secrets. For example, Bangladesh has an absolute cost advantage in garment manufacturing due to their accumulated experience over the last few decades. Second is control of inputs required for production, such as labor, materials, equipment, or managerial skills that are limited in supply. Many Asian countries enjoy this benefit, especially with their labor force. Middle Eastern countries also enjoy this benefit with their stock of fuel. Now the third one is access to cheaper funds because existing companies represent lower risk than new entrants. Many banks, financial institutions perceive lower risk involved with established companies than the new companies. Capital requirements. Firms choosing to enter any industry must commit resources for facilities, to purchase inventory, to pay salaries and benefits, etc. Though entry may seem attractive because there are no apparent barriers to entry, a potential new entrant may not have sufficient capital to enter the industry. Switching cost. Switching costs arise when a customer invests time, energy, and money switching from the products offered by one established company to the products offered by a new entrant. When switching costs are high, customers can be locked into the product offerings of established companies, even if new entrants offer better products. Government regulations. Historically, government regulation has constituted a major entry barriers for many industries. For example, some industries are difficult to enter where there is a requirement of a huge capital, such as a private university or banks. Government decisions and policies that can control entry into industries include the granting of license and permits for some business, for example, public utility industry including local telephone service, water, electric power such as DISCO, deregulation and antitrust issues. Government does not encourage monopoly for many reasons. For example, it is not a citizen-friendly company because they can charge a very high price for that product since there is no competition, and as I say, it reduces competition. So while the following entry barriers due to government deregulation in the last few decades had resulted in significant new entry, an increase in the intensity of industry competition and lower industry profit rates, the geopolitical tensions among the Eastern and Western power has seen increasing regulatory measures such as higher tariffs and restricted movements of goods between countries. These would have serious potential impact on competitiveness of business around the globe. And finally, the access to distribution channel. The access to distribution channel by new entrants can be a challenging task, which will reduce the risk of potential entrants. As existing firms in an industry generally have developed effective channels for distributing products, the same channels may not be available to new firms entering an industry. Thus, access or lack of it may serve as an effective barrier to entry. This may be particularly true for consumers' non-durable goods because of the limited amount of shelf space available in retail stores. Further, after building a relationship with the distributors, a firm usually nurtures it, thus creating switching cost for the distributors. To sum up, We can say that if established companies have built brand loyalty for their products, have an absolute cost advantage over potential competitors, have significant scale economies, are the beneficiaries of high switching cost, or enjoy regulatory protection, the risk of entry by potential competitors is greatly diminished. It is a weak competitive force. Consequently, established companies can charge higher prices and industry profits are therefore higher. Evidence from academic research suggests that the height of barriers to entry is one of the most important determinants of profit rates within an industry. The next force that I am going to talk about is the bargaining power of suppliers. Suppliers are the organizations and individuals that provide inputs into the industry such as materials, services, and labor. Suppliers are powerful when firms' profitability is reduced by suppliers' actions. And suppliers can exert their power principally in two ways. One is by raising prices of their supplies, and number two is by restricting the quality and quantity of their supplies. Since powerful suppliers squeeze profits out of an industry by raising the cost of companies in the industry, suppliers are considered as a threat. The powerful suppliers are considered as a threat. Now, suppliers are powerful when the supplier segment of the industry is dominated by a few large companies and is more consolidated than the industry to which it sells. When satisfactory substitute products are not available to the industry firms. I repeat, when the satisfactory substitute products are not available to industry firms, when industry firms are not a significant customer group for the supplier, when suppliers' goods are critical to buyers' marketplace success, when effectiveness of suppliers' products has created high switching cost for buyers, when suppliers represent a credible threat to integrate forward into the buyer's industry, especially when suppliers have substantial resources and provide high quality and differentiated products. And finally, when companies in the industry cannot threaten to enter their supplier industry and make their own inputs as a tactic for lowering the price of inputs. In the airline industry, suppliers' bargaining power is changing. There are few suppliers, but demand for the major aircrafts is also low. Boeing and Airbus compete strongly for most orders of major aircraft. However, China has recently announced plans to enter the market by building large commercial aircraft, and China is a significant country that is projected to purchase thousands of aircrafts. The next competitive force that I am going to talk about is the power of buyers or bargaining power of buyers. An industry buyers may be the individual customers who consume its products, that is end users, or the companies that distribute an industry products to end users, such as retailers or wholesalers. The bargaining power of buyers refers to the ability of buyers to bargain down prices charged by the companies in the industry, or to raise the cost of companies in the industry by demanding better product quality and service. Powerful buyers therefore should be viewed as a threat. Buyers are most powerful in the following circumstances: when the buyers have choice of whom to buy from. This happens in commodity products where suppliers' products are undifferentiated and standardized. When buyers purchase in large quantities, they can use their purchasing power as leverage to bargain for price reduction. When the supply industry depends upon buyers for a large percentage of its total orders. When switching costs are low or nil and buyers can pit the supplying companies against each other to force the price down. When it is economically feasible for buyers to purchase an input from several companies at once so that buyers can pit one company in the industry against another. And when buyers can threaten to enter the industry and independently produce the product thus supplying their own needs, they can force down industry prices. The next force that I am going to focus on the power of substitute products. Substitute products are goods or services from outside a given industry that perform similar or the same functions as a product that the industry produces. The existence of close substitutes is a strong competitive threat because this limits the price that the companies in one industry can charge for their product, which also limits industry profitability. In general, product substitute presents a strong threat to the firm when customers face few or if any switching cost, when the substitute product price is lower and their quality and performance capabilities are equal to or greater than those of the competing product, and when a firm can overcome this threat by offering products with higher value based on quality, innovation, service, and cost. Firms can offset the attractiveness of substitute products by differentiating their products in ways that are perceived by customers as relevant. Viable strategies might include price, product quality, product features, location, or service level. Some of the examples of traditional and substitute products and their uses are as follows. Traditional product was overnight delivery, but the substitute product these days is email and many other apps that deliver your messages. So the uses, these two, both traditional and substitute products are used to finally deliver the documents. Another one is glass. Traditionally the glass was used, but these days we can see that there are a lot of plastics are becoming the substitute products of glass, and both of them are using for the same purpose, which is as containers. Coffee and tea, so these days we can see they are substitute for each other, and their major usage is for beverage reasons. So either people can buy a coffee or tea, but they have the same, they satisfy the same need for beverage drinking. And paper bags, these days we have substitute for paper bags, that is plastic bags, and so we can see that there are a lot of substitutes these days of the traditional product that we used to use, and that have become a competitive force for this traditional food product industry. The next force is intensity of rivalry among competitors. Competitive struggle between companies within the industry occurs to gain market share from each other. Intense rivalry among established companies constitute a strong threat to profitability. Factors that impact the intensity of rivalry among established companies within an industry include industry competitive structure, that is the number and size distribution of companies in it. Industry structure vary, and different structures have different implications for the intensity of rivalry. A fragmented industry consists of a large number of small and medium-sized companies Low entry barriers and commodity type products that are difficult to differentiate characterize many fragmented industries. A fragmented industry structure then constitutes a threat rather than an opportunity. Rivalry is high in such market. On the other hand, a consolidated industry is dominated by a small number of large companies in the form of oligopoly, or in extreme cases by just one company, which is just a monopoly. And companies often are in a position to determine industry prices. In consolidated industries, companies are interdependent because one company's competitive actions, changes in price or quality, directly affect the market share of its rivals and thus their profitability. So when one company makes a move, this generally forces a response from its rivals, and the consequence of such competitive interdependence can be a dangerous competitive spiral. Companies in consolidated industries sometimes seek to reduce this threat by following the prices set by dominant company in the industry. However, companies must be careful, for explicit face-to-face price fixing agreements are illegal. Second one is demand condition. Growing demand tends to reduce rivalry because all companies can sell more without taking market share away from other companies. Demand declines when the customers exit the marketplace or when each customer purchases less, leading to rivalry. Cost condition. When fixed costs are high, profitability is highly leveraged to sales volume, and we see more rivalry in this kind of situation. And next one is lack of differentiation or low switching cost. That also generates rivalry within the industry, because customers consider this as more like an standardized product. Without innovation, without differentiation, they would not be willing to pay any price difference. What happens is, we can see that suppliers or sellers are engaged in every possible activity to attract customers, and they are engaged in cutthroat competition in here. Exit barriers. The final one. Economic, strategic, and emotional factors that prevent companies from leaving an industry. When exit barriers are high, companies become locked into an unprofitable industry where overall demand is static or declining. The result is often excess productive capacity, leading to even more intense rivalry and price competition as companies cut prices, attempting to obtain the customer orders needed to use their idle capacity and cover their fixed costs. Common dimensions on which rivalry is based include price, service, and innovation. So the last force that affect industry profitability and competitiveness is called complementers. Complementers are companies that sell complementary goods or services and thus add value to focal firms' goods or services. Examples may include Intel and Microsoft, iPhone and app developers. We can see, like, the more the apps we have, we will be selling more iPhones, or we'll be buying more iPhones, because these are complementary to each other. When used together, apps and smartphone, the combined products better satisfy customer demands. Strong complementers provide an increased opportunity for creating value. Conversely, if competitors are weak and are not producing attractive complementary products, they can become a threat. and they can slow industry growth and limit profitability. Complementers often gain so much power that they are able to extract profit from the industry to which they provide complements. Complementers can therefore be a strong competitive threat too. So, following a study of the 5 industry forces, the firm has the insights required to determine an industry's attractiveness in terms of the potential to earn adequate or superior returns on its invested capital. In general, the stronger the competitive forces, the lower the profit potential for an industry's firm. An unattractive industry has low entry barriers, suppliers and buyers with strong bargaining positions, strong competitive threats from product substitutes, and intense rivalry among competitors, which make it difficult for firms to achieve strategic competitiveness and earn above average return. Analyzing the industry environment in order to identify opportunities and threats leads logically to a discussion of what strategies should be adopted to exploit opportunities and counter threats. So, strategic group is a group of companies within an industry that are pursuing the same basic strategies as the companies within the group, but different strategies than those of companies outside the group. This is important concept because not every firm in the industry considers or perceives every other firm is their competitors. We have different groups of companies in the industry, and they are all called different strategic groups. So companies in an industry often differ significantly from one another with regard to the way they strategically position their products in the market. Analyzing strategic groups can be helpful in diagnosing competition, positioning, and profitability of firms competing with an industry. Competitive rivalry is greater within the strategic group than between strategic groups. Factors such as distribution channels they use, the market segment they serve, the quality of their products, technological leadership, customer service, pricing policy, advertising policy, and promotion that all affect product positioning. Now, strategic group have several implications. Since not every firm is a competitor of one firm, or in other words, a company can only compete with few other companies operating within the same industry, but they have the same kind of strategies. They do not compete with other firms within the same industry, but who have different kind of strategies. For example, Mercedes compete with BMW more than with Toyota and Honda and Nissan, because these two groups of companies, Mercedes and BMW and Volvo, probably belong to one strategic group in terms of their strategy, which is mostly differentiation and quality and high price, whereas the Toyota, Honda and Nissan, they follow a strategy more like a either a hybrid or a more like a cost leadership strategy. They are focusing more on the target customers are different. They're focusing more on cost savings. So we see that these two group of companies, they rarely compete. So now these strategic groups is an important concept to understand for managers because it has got several implications. First of all, because firms within a group pursue similar strategy like Mercedes, BMW and Volvo, then customers of these three groups of these three automobiles view them as direct substitute for each other. So they consider, oh, BMW is probably a substitute for Mercedes. Okay, so the immediate threat to a company are their rivals within its own strategic groups. Now, the second implication is the closer the strategic groups are in terms of their strategies, the greater is the likelihood of rivalry between the groups. So if we see that Mercedes, BMW and Volvo and Toyota, Nissan and Honda, they are following almost the similar kind of strategies, then there will be a lot of competition between these two groups. Otherwise, they will not compete with each other. The third implication is the strength of the five forces differ across strategic groups. For example, the strategic group that follows the strategy of differentiation like Mercedes, BMW and Volvo do not face much threat from their customers, while companies like Toyota, Nissan, Honda may face greater degree of threat from their customer because of their similar strategic focus. This figure presents the strategic group of commercial aerospace industry based on seat capacity and distance travel. You can create strategic groups in many other industries following some other criteria: differentiation, cost leadership, the strategies they follow, the pricing strategies, the quality they offer. So you can do it in that way, or the market that they serve. So you can create strategic groups in any other industries following those attributes. But remember that some strategic groups are more desirable than others. Like in here, maybe Boeing and Airbus strategic group, that is larger jet, could be a more desirable options for making profit, and regional jet companies like Bombardier, Embraer and Fokker, they can or they may aspire to move into that strategic groups. Okay, because the managers may sense an opportunity and they might contemplate changing their strategy and move to compete in that strategic group. However, taking advantage of this opportunity may be difficult because of mobility barriers between strategic groups. Mobility barriers are within industry factors, the factors within the industry that inhibit the movement of companies between strategic groups. They include the barriers to entry into a group and the barriers to exit from company's existing group. Say Bombardier may not exit from this group because they might have some kind of strategic, economic and emotional kind of exit barriers in there. So they may not exit from this, or they may not have the core competence to build a large carrier jet. So they may not be, they may have that kind of exit barriers. And the other one is they also may have entry barriers, as I said, the core competence or capital requirement, or maybe the access to the capital. So all these kind of barriers can inhibit Bombardier to move to that strategic group where Boeing and Airbus compete. So what I say, before making any decision to another strategic groups, manager must determine if it is cost effective to overcome mobility barriers. And they also must realize that companies in other strategic groups become their competitors once they overcome mobility barriers. So that means Bombardier doesn't consider Boeing currently as their competitors, but as soon as they move to that group, Boeing would be their direct competitors, and that would be a very challenging task unless this Bombardier has got the right kind of competencies, resources and capabilities to compete with Boeing and Airbus. So the strength and nature of each competitive force also changes as an industry evolves, particularly the two forces. One is the risk of entry by potential competitors and the second one is rivalry among existing firms. A useful tool for analyzing the effects that industry evolution has on competitive forces is the industry lifecycle model. This model identifies 5 sequential stages in the evolution of an industry that lead to 5 distinct kinds of industry environment. It starts with the embryonic industry, which refers to an industry which had just begun to develop. Growth at this stage is slow because of the factors such as buyers' unfamiliarity with the industry's product. The price is high due to the inability of companies to reap any significant scale economies, and the poorly developed distribution channels, which limits the sellers to sell more products to the customers. Now, barriers to entry tend to be based on access to the key technological know-how. It happens to the smartphone. When it came to the market, there was only one supplier, because many other suppliers do not have any access to this technological know-how, so they couldn't join the market. Rivalry in embryonic industry is based on so much on price, not so much on price, but on how we can educate our customers, how we can open our distribution channel so that we can transport our product to the customers, we can make it available to the customers, and how we can perfect the design of the product. AstraZeneca vaccine is another example. Like, because it is the new product, many companies do not have the access to this technological know-how. Many developing countries, laboratories or pharmaceutical companies are not able to produce that vaccine. They do not have the licensing also, and the product is also not very perfect at the moment. We have seen the flaws attached with this product currently. It sometimes even creates a blood clots and in human body. Now, once the demand for industry product begins to increase, the industry develops the characteristics of a growth industry. In growth industry, many first-time customers enter the market and they buy the product. So when the customers become more familiar with the product, when the price falls because of the scale economies reaped by the companies, and when new companies enter the industry and increase the supply, and when the distribution channels are developed, then an industry starts growing. Now, high growth usually means that new entrants can be absorbed into an industry without a marked increase in the intensity of rivalry. It's like this: when the supply is 70 but the demand is 100, you still have 30 more product to be filled in the market. So people can, or companies can, still come and join the industry, but there will be no competition because the supply is not exceeding the demand. But when the supply will exceed the demand, then we'll see a lot of price competition, rivalry, and between the companies in that next stage. We will explain that in the shakeout stage. So, as I mentioned, explosive growth cannot be maintained indefinitely. Sooner or later, the rate of growth slows down and the industry enters the shakeout stage. And in the shakeout stage, demand approaches saturation levels, where more and more of the demand is limited to the replacement demand because fewer potential first-time buyers remain. So you are still buying when the 100 demand is supplied by 100. Its demand is matched by 100 supplies. You still buy the iPhone. It's not because you are buying it for the first time, but it is a replacement. You are buying a new version. Your old version is not functioning anymore or has trouble functioning. So, but no new customer is joining at this point in the shakeout stage. So as the industry enters the shakeout stage, rivalry between companies become more intense. Typically, companies that have become accustomed to rapid growth continue to add capacity at rates consistent with the past growth. So that means demand is no longer growing at historic rates, at a higher rate that was happening in the growth stage, and the consequence is the emergence of excess productive capacity that lead to price cutthroat competition of price and intense rivalry, because everybody tries to attract customers, and mostly the replacement customer. The shakeout stage ends when the industry enters the mature stage. The market is totally saturated this time. Demand is limited to replacement demand, and growth is low or zero. There is no growth. Even replacement, maybe because this product is becoming more like a standardized product. No innovations in there. Typically, the growth that remains comes from population expansion, bringing new customers into the market, or increasing replacement demand. So if you have more people in the capital city, or more people are now getting employment, so have the money, so they buy it, but it is not, otherwise it is not creating demand that they were creating at the early stage. As an industry enters maturity, barriers to entry increase, and the threat of entry from potential competitor decrease. Because now every company that are currently operating, they all try to protect their market share. They do not really let any new company to enter the market, and it is also very expensive, because the fixed cost would be higher for the new entrants, and the growth rate is also not very high. So as a result of the shakeout, most industries in the maturity stage consolidate and become oligopolies. So what happens in the industry, we see that many companies, they join, one company buys another company, they merge with each other. That means, in Bangladesh, for example, there are 55 banks, and not every banks is performing greatly, or adequately, I should rather say. So and this is a kind of a market where we see that market is saturated. What we need to do is we need to really go for more consolidation, more merger and acquisition. There would be, so that either it would be oligopolies kind of market. In a perfectly competitive market, that would be so difficult to sustain in that industry. Eventually, most industries enter a stage of decline where growth becomes negative, for a variety of reasons, including technological substitutions, social change, demographics, and international competition. So now you see, like when the product comes, like iPhone, like we have so many competitors coming from so many different parts of the world, and now it is going to a kind of a declining stage. Within a declining industry, the degree of rivalry among established companies usually increases. So rivalry is very, very strong in a declining industry, because every company tries to do everything to attract customers. Depending on the speed of the decline and the height of exit barriers, competitive pressures can become a fierce, as in this takeout stage. You will see a lot of price competition in here, because every product is almost same quality, they serve the same purpose, but what happens, how companies compete in here? By cutting down their price. See how they can do that. And this is, unless you go for some kind of innovations, industry continues to decline. Since the effects of competitive forces and opportunities and threats vary in different kinds of industry life cycle stages, managers have to tailor their strategies to changing industry conditions. So the strategies that managers employ in the embryonic stage will not work in the declining stage, or not work in the mature stage. In the growth stage, strategy would be absolutely different. So that is why that is what managers need to be careful about. So what we have seen, that the competitive forces, strategic groups, and the life cycle models provide useful ways of thinking about and analyzing the nature of competition within an industry in order to identify opportunities and threats. However, each of these has limitations, and managers must be aware of their shortcomings. Let's focus on those shortcomings. First one is life cycle issues. It is important to remember that the industry life cycle model is a generalization. In practice, industry life cycles do not always follow the pattern. For example, in some cases, growth is so rapid that the embryonic stage is skipped altogether. Industry growth can be revitalized after a long period of decline through innovation or social changes. Again, in the smartphone that happened, we have seen that there was a long period of stability, and then we have seen innovations came with this idea of smartphone. Now, the second one is innovation and change. I have already given you some idea about it. So over any reasonable length of time in many industries, competition can be viewed as a process driven by innovation. Innovation is frequently the major factor in industry evolution and propels a company's movement through the industry life cycle. Innovation is attractive because companies that pioneer new products, process, or strategies can often earn enormous profits. Successful innovations can transform the nature of industry competition. In recent decades, one frequent consequence of innovation has been to lower the fixed cost of production, thereby reducing barriers to entry and allowing new, smaller enterprises to compete with large established organizations. Michael Porter talks of innovation as unfreezing and reshaping industry structure. He argues that after a period of turbulence triggered by innovation, the structure of an industry once more settles down into a fairly stable pattern, and the 5 forces and strategic group concepts can once more be applied. This view of evolution of industry structure is often referred to as punctuated equilibrium. The punctuated equilibrium, you can see it in the slide in here in the figure. This view holds that long periods of equilibrium, that means refreezing, when an industry structure is stable, are punctuated by periods of rapid changes, that means unfreezing, when industry structure is revolutionized by innovation. This is observed in automobile industry, which now moves to produce electric vehicle after a long period of stability with petrol and gas driven cars. And the final one is, or the final criticism of industry models is that these models overemphasize the importance of industry structure as a determinant of companies' performance and underemphasize the importance of variations of differences among companies within an industry or a strategic group. Research suggests that a company's individual resources, capacities, and core competencies may be more important determinants of its profitability than the industry or strategic group of which the company operates. Although these findings do not invalidate the competitive forces and strategic group models, they do imply that the models are imperfect predictors of enterprise profitability. A company will not be profitable just because it is based in an attractive industry or in attractive strategic group. So now, So now we have come to the third component of external environmental analysis, which is competitor analysis. Competitor analysis represents a necessary adjunct to performing an industry analysis. It is an extension to industry analysis. An industry analysis provides information regarding potential source of competition, including the possible strategic actions and reactions and effects on profitability for all firms competing in an industry. However, a structured competitor analysis enables the firm to focus its attention on those firms only with which it will directly compete, and is especially important when a firm faces a few powerful competitors. Competitor analysis is interested ultimately in developing a profile on how competitors might be expected to respond to a firm's strategic actions or moves. This process involves developing answers to a series of questions about competitors, such as what is competitors' future objectives, what is their current strategy, what are the competitors' assumptions about the industry, and what are the capabilities as shown by competitors' strengths and weaknesses. Competitors analysis focuses on each company against which a firm competes directly. Okay, knowledge about these four dimensions helps the firm prepare an anticipated response profile for each competitor. This figure shows how the components of competitor analysis help the firm prepare an anticipated response profile for each competitor. You may assume yourself as maybe the Pepsi product manager, and you can make an attempt to develop a competitive profile of Coca-Cola, or maybe the company, you can develop a competitor analysis or profile for the company that you are currently working in. Now, when we conduct competitor analysis, we must gather competitor intelligence, which is the set of data and information needed to better understand and anticipate competitors' objectives, strategies, assumptions, and capabilities. Competitors' intelligence is critical to competitor analysis because it does not only help a firm understand competitors' intentions, but also the strategic implications resulting from them. So if they based on their current strategy, if they go for innovations, or if they try to improve the quality of their product, how it is going to affect our strategy. So that is why it is important to understand or to collect all those competitor intelligence. Competitors' intelligence should be performed both for domestic and international competitors. Actually, who are your direct competitors? You can do, if it is an international company, you can check that. If it is a local competitor, you can also develop a profile for that competitor, whoever is your direct competitors. And the final slides, that what we say, that while gathering competitor intelligence, a company must ensure that all data and information related to competitors are gathered both legally and ethically. This is critical because many employees may feel pressure to rely on techniques that are questionable from an ethical perspective, especially if they perceive value to their own careers from successfully obtaining such information. So maybe your managers are asking you to collect data and you are feeling threatened because if you do not collect this data, you may risk your job. So, but you have to be aware of the ethical and legal aspects of it. It seems obvious that information that, number one, is either publicly available, such as annual reports, regulatory filings, brochures, advertising and promotion materials, or number two, information that is obtained by attending trade shows and conventions, can be used without ethical and or legal implication. However, information obtained in an unethical or illegal manner, such as theft, blackmail, or eavesdropping, cannot, or at least should not, be used. With that, I finish this lecture in here. I will see you next week when we talk about when we are going to analyze our company's internal environment with the purpose of identifying the strengths and weaknesses in terms of our capacity, resources, and core competencies. Thank you all.